Okay, so we had chapter 4, which was informal assessments, and we want to apologize ahead of time because ours was really super long. I think we have almost 40 slides. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride, guys. So first thing that we're going to cover is just kind of an introduction to what it is. Informal assessments are used to inform. They also provide critical information such as identification and eligibility for different needs of a student, like if they would need to be put into special ed. This is a way to identify their eligibility for it. Provide key diagnostic information, program, and then instructional decision making that you may need during any point in time. So an authentic assessment and what it measures, it is a non-traditional assessment. So we've learned about traditional and non-traditional. An authentic assessment is going to be an informal, non-traditional. So it could just be taking place in the classroom. Non-traditional assessments are informal tests prepared by the teacher in the classroom for a particular subject and under specific conditions that can be modified or adjusted to meet a student's needs and the teacher's purposes. And this is on page 97 in our book. Authentic assessments are based on the application of knowledge and the use of meaningful, complex, relevant skills to produce productions or simulate real-life activities in real-world settings. So like what they would actually use in real life. This isn't going to be just like Jacob bought 20 watermelons. For today's students to succeed in tomorrow's workplace is what it's gauging towards, found on page 98 and 100 in the book. Preliminary assessments such as interviewing. The topics will be the interviewing process, a teacher interview, a parent interview, and a student's interview. So the interviewing process is the interaction, generally a face-to-face interaction between you and whoever you're talking to, in which the participants verbally share information about the student. In the teacher interview, they provide critical information on how the child functions day to day. In addition to primary teachers, you will often find other teachers in the classroom that have to deal with the student. So like the art teacher may come in. The parent interview, it's critical for parental involvement in assessments, and it was mandated in 1976 during the Education for All Handicapped Children. So it requires the parents to be informed of their rights and the consent to the evaluation process. Student interview can give the evaluator insight into the student's ability to communicate as well as how they confront, analyze, and solve a problem. So it's you really getting to know the student and see how they analyze different things. Do we need to slow down for you guys? Okay. Preliminary assessments, record and work sample review. So it's going to be the record review and the work sample analysis is what's going to be covered. So the record review, the analysis of students' school history need to be a priority and should be one of the initial sources of the information collected in the evaluation process. If the student is classified, the confidential files includes the IEP team records that can provide critical link when evaluating is present, progress, and planning for the future. The work sample analysis involves students review work products by focusing on the quality and quantity of their output, so how much they did and how well they did it. The preliminary assessments, and these are all the things that will be covered. The observation process, which includes student observations, systematic observations, group setting observations, testing session observations, the visual and auditory, what do you observe with those, visual and auditory processing, and perpetual problems and analysis of the classroom's environment. So the observation process, they are the most objective method of the assessment. The most widely used method for evaluating a student in school is the observation process, and teachers should be the observers of not only how the student is doing, but also what, when, and why the student is performing the way that they are in the classroom. Student observations, many prominent student behaviors are evident in written records and work samples and can be identified only in direct contact with the student in their natural environment. They only provide a small glimpse of what the student is doing, so it's not saying that little Johnny is acting out all the time, but at this certain time he was. The systematic observations reveals how the student works through different tasks, so how they act during math, during reading, and all that. Observations in group setting, exactly how it sounds. How the student acts when they're put into a group, because they can act different when they're alone versus when they're with someone else. Observations during testing sessions, so their attitude, their attention, or their behavior, their attitude, and their interaction while they're taking a test, while they're working just one-on-one with that evaluator. Characteristics of visual and auditory that you need to observe. Vision problems can interfere with the process of learning, so if a student can't see the board, that's probably a pretty dramatic thing for them, and typically do not complain of vision difficulties. So if a student can't see, they aren't just going to raise their hand and say, I can't see anything on that board. You have to kind of be able to tell, okay, they're squinting, maybe they need to move forward to see the board. Maybe we should get them an eye appointment or something. Teachers are often the first ones to note that a student has a hearing problem as well. So that's a big responsibility on us as future teachers. Visual and auditory processing or perpetual problems. Visual and hearing problems include seeing and hearing auditory patterns such as clusters of letters, blends, the syllables, and just all over words. They can have adequate casual and audits accurately yet poor processing ability. So they can see and hear just fine, but they may not be processing it as well as they should. And then the analysis of the classroom environment. Environmental factors can significantly affect the student's interests, their motivation, and their perseverance in the classroom. So to promote maximum student performance, you need to make sure that your classroom is what they need it to be. So I'm not going to sit like Kathy's over in that corner. If she had a vision problem and a hearing problem, she probably would be up here closer to us. We're not going to sit her over in that corner. And generally followed by a student interview, so you will talk with that student. And then types of informal measures achievements. The creation referenced assessments, task analysis, and dynamic assessments. So the creation reference assessments. What? Criterion. It's been a long day, guys. Criterion reference assessments compare students' performance to a performance standard or a criterion rather than a performance of other students. So how well they've done compared to as well as their students have. You aren't going to compare them to other students in the classroom. Compares with list behavioral objectives, initially discrete skills areas rather than other students of the same grade, and based on task analytic models that are used to examine the reasons for defects in a skill or a concept. Task analysis involves breaking down, so you're going to take smaller chunks. We're going to use those stair steps and just instead of just saying, go climb the mountain, we're going to break it down for them. And dynamic assessments are assessment methods which students are evaluated to participate in the instructional process, and you obtain students' current functioning level is not only their objective of this model.
So then we talk about curriculum-based measurements, the CBMs. So they are standard, short, simple fluency assessments to monitor students' growth. They may be modified to reflect more difficult learning objectives, and they contain documented reliability and validity, which we heard from Jordan. And they can look at the individual student, how the student performs compared to a goal, how they compare instructionally, and then normatively, I just messed that up, but how they compare to peers. And so types of curriculum-based assessments, there's curriculum-based probes. These are brief timed, easy administered quiz. They demonstrate students' competencies in completing a taught skill. They're an efficient way to evaluate academic behavior and progress, and they measure their acquisition, fluency, and maintenance in a basic skill area. A performance assessment is an application of knowledge and use of skills to create a product. Students demonstrate specific skills based on pre-established standards. And then a portfolio assessment is a collection of student work across a range of content areas, exhibits students' ability, efforts, and achievements over a period of time. So there's our 3 types. Here's some more. Formal inventories are screening devices that access portions of curriculum based on skills taught. They allow assessment of a wide range of skills and concepts. They may be used as a pre-teaching tool. A functional or adaptive assessment looks at how the student functions at home, school, and in the community. So that's outside of the curriculum. So that may be how they handle money or how they dress in the morning. Response and journals and learning logs. This is the student's personal record of their work. They ask, what have I learned, how did I learn it, and what did I not understand? Essentially, they evaluate or reflect their learning experiences. Think aloud technique is the process which students verbally explain how they completed a task. Teachers must be able to observe the student's performance. They must be knowledgeable about the curriculum and familiar with cognitive strategies. A questionnaire is a group of questions meant to elicit information. This may be from a parent, student, or other professional, and it may be face-to-face or mailed. A checklist is arranged in a consistent manner to quickly record whether specific skills are present. The purpose of a checklist should define the type of checklist used. And so I explain that in the next slide, because here are guidelines of developing a checklist. You want to determine what is observed or evaluated, establish a hierarchy of performance to be evaluated, identify criteria to be evaluated, keep criteria brief, maintain word choice and format that is objective, focus on the positive, for example, what can students do versus what can't they do, decide on the system to be used to track observations, maintain a word choice and format that is objective. And then other types of CBMs, there's error analysis. This examines students' response on work samples, identifies difficult areas in students' approach to a task. A self-evaluation is a collection of data based on student reports of feelings, involvement, and knowledge. This also promotes metacognitive self-monitoring and ownership. Peer evaluations, this is students apply criteria to sample of words. Students must be fully involved in evaluation to promote positive learning, motivation, and responsibility. And so then we go into rubrics. So rubrics are an established guideline to describe levels of expected performance. Their points are awarded per level of performance, and criteria is expressed numerically and is accompanied by specific descriptors. So you have analytic and holistic. Analytic divides expectation into essential traits to be judged separately. These are categorical descriptors and extremely detailed. That each area must be scored individually, and students may be individually scored on organization, neatness, strategy, etc. Holistics are points awarded for the whole product or performance. So based on overall impression of students' work, it may include ranking students by quality of work or categorizing individual products. These usually contain no feedback or little. So here's an example of a rubric. Does anyone know if this is holistic or analytic? I'll go to the next one. We'll see. So this is another one. So there are 2 different types. So if you want to compare them and see which one's which. You go back to the first one.
If you look, it has like 75% or better. Think of it as a whole.
Well, and then also if you look, it's not breaking down exactly what they're grading. Whereas this holistic one, it has qualities of models, it has evidence-based argument and revision process. It also clearly defines every single point area. Whereas this one just has a description.
That one's holistic, that one's analytic.
Yes.
And it said little to no feedback, so look at how little's actually wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then there's two other types of rubrics. These are rating skills and acre papers. Rating skills identify students' knowledge, skills, and attitudes through a numerical grade. This may be to rate students' level of proficiency or peer and self-evaluations. Anchor papers are sort of like a sample paper. These are representative products, papers, and performance to guide standardized scoring to ensure consistency. So this is reporting progress to parents. Under IDAA 97, teachers must inform and involve parents on a regular basis. So I think the book talks about before this law, a lot of times it was sort of when they revised it or when they completely redid the IEP plan. So CBA probes, which were discussed earlier, are an efficient way to evaluate if students are meeting goals and objectives. These results can be graphed to track ongoing progress toward a year goal. So when you complete a CBA probe, really what it's saying is that you can send it to a parent. You can do this through a phone call, email, or checklist. This means that parents then they can look at what's happening in school and they can know so they can reinforce the progress at home. So this is our activity. So if everyone just wants to get out a piece of paper, if you don't have a piece of paper, tell me.
They can be a piece of scratch paper, guys. You can take out a Post-it note. We don't really care.
Are you collecting them?
Sure.
No, I was going to do on the back of my check.
No, you can do it on there.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Okay. I was like, oh, fine. Can you go back to the assessment slide?
Which one?
Wherever it lists off the different types. Do you have like one slide that does equal bunch?
Not really.
Okay. Well,
How do I exit full screen? Oh.
There you go.
Okay. So just answer which assessment. It could be one of the CBA or CBM probes, whichever one you think is most helpful.
What assessment tools do you see yourself using?
Well, for example, I would say one that I really liked is like the talk out loud. Because then if a student's struggling with say math or something, you could have them walk through it. Well, here's what I'm doing. Here's my process in my head. Is that what you put? Yeah. Does anyone want to share theirs? Anyone bring?
I said checklist because I like to cross things, know what I have to do, and I cross things off, so that would be helpful for a teacher and a student.
That's a good one.
That is. Anyone else?
CPM's like a time test, correct?
They're just like short quizzes, kind of.
I said like those because like if you do it for like reading, you can see like how fluent they are, like how you practice for reading and stuff.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to share? That's okay.
Yeah.